Stop waiting for the confession. You are standing there with absolute, cold, hard proof of their betrayal in your hands, and you are waiting for them to look you in the eye and say, "I was wrong." It is never going to happen. The reason you feel like you're losing your mind is because you're expecting a human response from someone who is currently running a high-stakes damage control operation. When they know they are guilty, they don't look for redemption, they look for a way to burn the evidence. When a narcissist is cornered, the mask doesn't just slip, it weaponizes. It is a terrifying dance of deflection and rewriting reality. You've seen it, the sudden rage, the accusations that you are the toxic one, the claim that you are just being too sensitive. Understanding this isn't just about labels. It is the only way to protect your sanity and stop the cycle of trying to convince someone who has already decided that they are incapable of being wrong. The concept of the guilt mirage is perhaps the most difficult hurdle for those entangled with a narcissist to overcome. Most of us operate under the fundamental assumption that when a person harms another, they feel a corresponding weight of remorse. We believe that if we simply present the facts clearly enough, or if we express our pain with enough sincerity, the other person will have an epiphany, acknowledge their wrongdoing, and seek to make amends. However, when dealing with a narcissist, this expectation is not just misplaced, it is inherently dangerous to your emotional well-being. In the narcissistic psyche, there is no internal moral compass that triggers a sense of guilt for hurting someone else. Their emotional architecture is not built for empathy or self-reflection in the face of interpersonal conflict. Instead, when they are confronted with their own destructive behavior, what you perceive as a moment of potential guilt is actually a state of extreme exposure anxiety. They are not looking inward to evaluate their actions, they are looking outward to evaluate the threat level. They perceive your demand for accountability not as a request for honesty, but as a direct attack on the carefully constructed facade they have spent years building. Because their ego is incredibly fragile, they cannot afford the psychic cost of admitting fault. For a healthy person, admitting a mistake is a simple act of integrity. For a narcissist, it is a catastrophic loss of status and a threat to their self-perceived superiority. Therefore, when you present them with evidence of their betrayal or cruelty, they do not experience the pangs of conscience that you do. Instead, they feel a frantic, defensive urgency to neutralize the threat you pose. They are not thinking about your pain, nor are they ruminating on their bad choices. They are calculating the most efficient way to deflect the blame, rewrite the narrative, and shift the focus away from their behavior and onto yours. This is why you can provide overwhelming proof, records, and witnesses, yet still be met with blank stares, confusion, or aggressive denial. They are not missing the truth. They are actively suppressing it to maintain their internal illusion of perfection, ensuring that the burden of the situation remains entirely on your shoulders while they remain untouched. Projection is the primary defensive maneuver a narcissist employs when they are cornered, functioning as a psychological survival strategy that allows them to dump their own toxic traits onto you. When they are confronted with a truth they cannot bear, such as their own infidelity, cruelty, or incompetence, they cannot process that shame internally. To do so would mean facing their own perceived inadequacy, an experience they find intolerable. Instead, they immediately externalize this discomfort by projecting it onto the closest available target, you. By accusing you of the very behaviors or emotions they are currently exhibiting, they effectively transform the dynamic from one where they are the perpetrator to one where you are suddenly cast as the offender. This process is deeply disorienting because it forces you to immediately shift your focus from their bad behavior to defending your own character. You came into the conversation with clear evidence of their actions, but within minutes, you find yourself arguing that you are not, in fact, the person they claim you are. If they are being dishonest, they will accuse you of lying. If they are being abusive, they will label you as the aggressive one. If they are the ones acting out of jealousy, they will insist that you are the insecure person in the relationship. By placing you in a perpetual state of defense, they successfully force you to use all your energy to explain your own motives, which means you have no energy left to hold them responsible for their original actions. This is not a mistake or a simple misunderstanding. It is a calculated inversion of reality. The narcissist relies on the fact that you have a conscience and a desire for relational harmony. They know you will stop to clarify and defend your integrity because you care about the truth, whereas they have no such constraint. As you expend effort trying to show them why their accusation is wrong, they are granted a free pass to ignore their own guilt. Over time, this cycle traps you in a distorted reality where you begin to wonder if perhaps you are the one with the problem. This is exactly what they intend, as it allows them to maintain their sense of superiority while offloading the burden of their conscience onto you, leaving them feeling innocent while you are left feeling confused, defensive, and exhausted. Right. The DARVO mechanism, an acronym for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender, represents the gold standard of the narcissistic playbook when they are confronted with their own wrongdoing. This is not a random collection of defensive behaviors, but a highly structured, strategic response designed to dismantle your credibility and neutralize any threat to their ego. The process begins with the first phase, denial, which is often blunt and baffling. Even when faced with undeniable evidence, digital footprints, or eyewitness accounts, the narcissist will look you in the eye and flatly reject the reality of the situation. This is not because they are unaware of the facts, but because they have decided that the truth is a variable they can manipulate rather than a fixed reality to which they must submit. Once they have established their baseline of denial, they immediately transition to the second phase, the attack. This is where the dynamic turns volatile. They will launch a preemptive strike on your character, your sanity, or your past mistakes to shift the focus. The goal here is to make the confrontation so painful or chaotic that you instinctively pull back to protect yourself. By attacking you, they effectively raise the cost of holding them accountable. Finally, they execute the reversal, which is the most damaging part of the sequence. They skillfully pivot to cast themselves as the injured party and you as the perpetrator. They will frame your attempt to discuss their behavior as abuse, harassment, or unwarranted cruelty. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about their actions, but about how badly you have hurt them by bringing the issue up in the first place. You find yourself in the surreal position of apologizing to the person who originally caused the harm, while they receive the sympathy and reassurance they believe they are entitled to. This entire sequence is designed to paralyze the victim. By the time you realize you are in a DARVO trap, you have usually been successfully shifted from an empowered person seeking truth to a defensive person begging for understanding. It is a brilliant, albeit cruel, system of shifting accountability that ensures the narcissist never has to sit with the discomfort of their own guilt, leaving you to carry the weight of their actions while they walk away with their ego entirely intact and their narrative secure. Source here. The phenomenon of the faux apology is one of the most maddening aspects of interacting with a narcissist because it mimics the form of accountability while completely gutting it of substance. When you finally force a confrontation and demand an acknowledgement of the pain they have caused, they may eventually offer a concession. However, this is rarely a sincere admission of fault. Rather, it is a surgical strike designed to silence you and neutralize the tension so that they can return to their preferred status quo. A hallmark of these empty gestures is the classic non-apology, often phrased as, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "I'm sorry if you were offended." Notice how the focus is entirely shifted away from their harmful actions and onto your internal reaction. By framing the issue as your feelings or your sensitivity, they effectively gaslight you into believing that the problem isn't what they did, but rather your irrational response to it. They are not taking ownership of their behavior. They are expressing regret that you had the audacity to be upset by it. These apologies are frequently performative, delivered with a rehearsed tone that sounds just vulnerable enough to pull at your heartstrings, but ultimately lacks any commitment to change. If you push for a more genuine acknowledgement, the narcissist will often become agitated, arguing that they have already apologized and that your continued pursuit of the issue is proof that you are vindictive or impossible to please. This puts you in a double bind. Accept the hollow apology and allow the behavior to continue, or reject it and be labeled as the unreasonable one who refuses to let go of the past. The strategic brilliance and cruelty of this tactic lies in its ability to terminate a difficult conversation. They provide just enough of a concession to make a reasonable person feel like they have won or that the situation is resolved, when in reality, nothing has changed. They are merely hitting a pause button on the conflict until they can regain their footing. By accepting these performative apologies, you are inadvertently signaling that the status quo is acceptable, while the narcissist learns that they can bypass true accountability simply by uttering a few well-placed words that contain no real remorse or intent for future growth. If you are currently stuck in this loop, trying to get the truth out of someone who is fundamentally incapable of giving it to you, hit the subscribe button below. We are going to break down the exact steps to stop the cycle of explanation and start the process of reclaiming your reality. Gaslighting the evidence is a cornerstone of the narcissistic defense strategy, functioning as a deliberate assault on your perception of reality. When you arrive at a confrontation armed with irrefutable proof, such as screenshots, recordings, or specific dates and times, a narcissist does not engage with the data as a rational actor would. Instead, they treat the evidence as a threat to their carefully constructed narrative, and their objective becomes the total invalidation of that evidence. They may begin by questioning your memory, suggesting that you are confused, overreacting, or remembering things wrong. This is a calculated attempt to make you doubt your own cognitive faculties. If you persist and point out the physical proof, they will likely shift to a strategy of minimization, dismissing the evidence as taken out of context, insignificant, or a misunderstanding of their true intent. They are masters at reframing the situation so that the evidence you hold, which clearly demonstrates their guilt, becomes a symptom of your own perceived instability or lack of perspective. This process is deeply corrosive because it attacks the very foundation of your trust in yourself. The narcissist knows that if they can get you to second-guess what you saw, heard, or experienced, they have effectively neutralized the threat. They may even go so far as to claim that you are obsessed with the past or looking for problems where none exist, turning your pursuit of truth into a character flaw. Even when you are holding objective documentation of their lies or abuse, they will continue to insist that your interpretation of those events is fundamentally flawed. By making you feel that you are the one who is losing it or being unreasonable, they escape the necessity of explaining their actions. They don't need to win the argument with logic. They only need to create enough doubt in your mind that you eventually drop the subject out of exhaustion. Over time, this constant erosion of your objective reality leaves you feeling untethered, making it increasingly difficult to trust your own senses. This allows the narcissist to continue their patterns of behavior without consequence, as you are far too busy trying to piece together your own fractured sense of what is real to maintain the pressure of accountability. Victim playing is a strategic pivot that effectively paralyzes any attempt at holding a narcissist accountable by turning the spotlight of sympathy away from your genuine pain and onto their fabricated suffering. When the evidence of their wrongdoing becomes undeniable, they frequently undergo an immediate, performative transformation into the primary victim of the situation. This move is designed to induce guilt in you, making you feel as though your demand for honesty is an act of aggression or cruelty. They might recount their own past hardships, emphasize their sacrifices for the relationship, or highlight how stressed or misunderstood they feel, effectively framing your confrontation as the final straw in a long list of perceived injustices they have endured at your hands. By shifting the narrative from their actions to their feelings of being attacked, they skillfully silence you. You suddenly find yourself in the position of needing to soothe their emotional distress rather than receiving the apology or accountability you deserve. This tactic serves to flip the power dynamic entirely. Instead of addressing the harm they caused, they successfully distract you with their own display of vulnerability or indignation. If you continue to insist on the original issue, they will use your persistence as further proof of your lack of empathy or harshness, thereby solidifying their role as the suffering martyr. This is deeply disorienting because it leverages your own natural human tendency to care about the well-being of others. The narcissist knows that if they can make you feel bad for them, you will instinctively pull back from your pursuit of justice. It is a form of emotional blackmail where the price of truth is the guilt of knowing you supposedly crushed an already hurting person. They will play the victim to silence dissent, rewriting history so that they are the ones who have been wrong. By successfully reframing the situation in this way, they ensure that the focus stays on their emotional needs and away from their accountability. You are left feeling drained and ashamed for trying to stand up for yourself, while they walk away with their ego bolstered by the sympathy they successfully extracted from you. This cycle allows them to evade the consequences of their actions, leaving you to deal with the fallout of their original transgression while you are simultaneously trying to comfort the very person who betrayed you. When a narcissist faces the terrifying prospect of being held accountable for their actions, they often resort to emotional extremes, either explosive, intimidating rage, or chilling, calculated withdrawal. Both are tactical maneuvers designed to make the cost of seeking the truth higher than the cost of simply letting the issue go. Explosive rage is often used as a blunt instrument to silence you immediately. When their ego is threatened by the truth, they may erupt in a sudden volcanic display of anger, shouting, blaming, or even making veiled threats. The intensity of this reaction is not proportional to the situation. It is a strategic bombardment meant to overwhelm your nervous system. By creating an atmosphere of fear, they force you into a state of fight or flight, making it impossible to continue a calm or rational discussion. You are no longer focused on their wrongdoing. You are focused on de-escalating the situation to ensure your own safety or to stop the yelling, which is exactly the outcome they desire. Conversely, some narcissists prefer the weapon of cold withdrawal, often called stonewalling or the silent treatment. If they cannot intimidate you into silence, they will simply remove their presence, communication, and affection entirely. This is a form of punishment, a message that your desire for truth has caused them such deep pain that they cannot bear to be around you. By going silent, they make you feel as though you have committed a grave error by bringing up the subject, and they force you to endure the anxiety of their absence until you become desperate enough to apologize just to restore the connection. You are left alone with your questions and your pain, while they remain firmly in control of the emotional environment. Both tactics serve the same purpose. They ensure that you stop pressing for the truth. Whether through the fire of rage or the ice of silence, the narcissist is sending a clear message that accountability will not be tolerated and that you will suffer if you continue to demand it. They would rather destroy the connection, temporarily or permanently, than admit fault or sit with the reality of their own actions. By fluctuating between these extremes, they keep you off balance, ensuring that you never quite know what to expect and making you fear the consequences of ever questioning them again. The fresh start hoax is a quintessential manipulative tactic employed by narcissists to bury their past transgressions without ever having to actually atone for them. When a conflict reaches a boiling point and you are finally pushing for real accountability, the narcissist may suddenly execute a jarring shift in demeanor. They will abandon their rage, their stonewalling, or their defensive accusations and replace them with an overwhelming surge of charm, affection, or forced positivity. They might suggest a date night, propose a grand getaway, or start acting with an intensity of kindness that feels almost surreal. The goal of this behavior is to signal, without ever saying it, that the conflict is effectively over and that the past should be considered irrelevant. They are attempting to gaslight the timeline of your relationship by creating an environment where bringing up the old issue feels like an act of unnecessary sabotage against the current, peaceful, fresh start they have manufactured. This tactic works because it preys on your natural desire for harmony and your hope that the relationship can return to a functional, loving state. When they offer this olive branch, it feels like a reward for your patience, making it incredibly difficult to keep holding the line on your boundaries. If you choose to revisit the unresolved issue, they will use your persistence as evidence that you are a person who dwells on negativity or refuses to forgive, thereby framing your pursuit of justice as the true problem in the relationship. They effectively frame their fresh start as a generous gift, and by questioning it, you are cast as an ungrateful partner who is actively trying to ruin the peace. This creates a cycle where the narcissist can act poorly, endure a brief period of confrontation, and then simply turn on the charm to sweep everything under the rug. You never get the resolution or the change in behavior you need. Instead, you get a temporary reprieve that comes at the cost of your own integrity. They do not want to fix the problem. They only want to bypass the consequences of it. By buying into this hoax, you are inadvertently teaching them that they do not need to do the hard work of self-reflection or growth, as they have found a reliable shortcut to return to the status quo whenever things get uncomfortable for their ego. Ultimately, the trap of seeking accountability from a narcissist is that you are trying to use a language they do not speak. You are searching for the truth as a form of closure, while they are treating every conversation as a tactical maneuver to protect a fragile, artificial image. When they know they are guilty, their reaction is not one of remorse, but of survival, and they will use projection, gaslighting, rage, and performative charm to ensure that the burden of their actions is placed firmly onto you. The most important realization you can take away from this is that your need for an admission of guilt is not the key to your freedom. Your detachment is. As long as you believe that you need them to admit they are wrong for you to be right, you are giving them the power to dictate your reality. You do not need their confession to validate what you already know to be true. True accountability is something you give to yourself by acknowledging the patterns, setting firm boundaries, and walking away from a cycle that is designed to keep you questioning your own sanity. Stop waiting for them to change. Stop explaining your logic to someone who is committed to misunderstanding it, and start investing that energy into reclaiming your own life. You are not responsible for their ego, and you are not required to participate in their cover-up. The moment you stop needing their validation, you break their power over you for good.